Hey everyone, it's Sam, and welcome back to the 911 Nonsense podcast. To stay in the loop, learn about upcoming guests, and join in the conversations with the Noon community, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And hey, if you like what you hear in this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to us. Mike Boone, a flight nurse and EMT, and Dr. Amanda Humphreys, an emergency medicine physician, join me to discuss teamwork, education, and mental health in EMS. Together, they share insights from Crash and Learn and Heavy Lies the Helmet, reflecting on the evolution of emergency medicine, generational shifts in emotional awareness, and the growing emphasis on self-reflection and resilience in the field. Let's get started. Hey guys, are you looking for a top-notch first aid kit? Look no further than Jump Medic. Owned by a seasoned paramedic with over a decade of EMS experience, their kits are user-friendly and packed with essential supplies. From the most popular Pro Gen 2 to the compact hardshell kit, they've got you covered. You can even customize your own kit with the Build-A-Bag option. Enter the code NOON10, N-O-O-N, the number 10, and enjoy 10% off your order. Free U.S. shipping, and everything is HSA FSA approved. Visit jumpmedic.com and follow @JumpMedicUSA on Instagram. Stay prepared with Jump Medic. All right. Thank you so much, Mike and Amanda, for joining me today on the 911 Nonsense podcast. I'm so excited to have you guys here. I know that you guys are both so crazy. You just finished Crash and Learn. Amanda, you just got a huge award. Like, you guys are two of the craziest people, busiest people that I've ever met in my whole life. How are you guys doing today?
Well, when you make it sound like that, I wonder if I should be doing worse.
I know, right?
No, we're doing well. Obviously, this is a busy time of year for us, but coming off the heels of Crash and Learn definitely gives us a moment to reflect and a moment to kind of reset. So I think we're in that transitional phase right now.
Yeah, I don't know what these seasons of the year that you talk about are. I haven't found the not busy one. So if you find it, let me know.
That's true. Sometimes I think we're gluttons for punishment, though, and when we're not busy, we find ways to be busy. So, I
Oh,
mean,
no
at least
doubt.
that's my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%.
My wife hates me
I
for
get
that.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Our loved ones that especially aren't in the industry, they don't always understand the I like to call it drive. Maybe they call it something else, but
Yeah.
regardless.
That's awesome. So can I get a really quick intro on who you are, what you do, how you got to where you're at? Mike, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. So my name is Mike Boone. I'm the co-founder of Heavy Lies the Helmet, co-founder uh, because my brother started the company with me. He is currently terminally ill and has stepped away from the platform, so it's kind of become my baby, but I still like to refer to it as such. And then the founder of Crash and Learn, which is the first or premier outdoor conference, which we're very happy about. But by trade, I'm a nurse and an EMT. I've been flying critical care full time for 12 and a half years. And then before that, just the typical experience that one has when they get into the pre hospital environment. But I still do fly full time. I am in a supervisor role at my shop, but it allows me to have some flexibility while still maintaining patient care, which is really important to me. We pride ourselves a lot in my circle on trying to maintain some level of direct patient contact, and that's one of the ways that I do that. So that brings me to present. And we obviously have the podcast, we have the full education platform, the conference, and then flying on the side, and then everything else I can fill the gaps with.
That's awesome. And Amanda, how about an intro?
Yeah, hey guys, my name is Amanda Humphreys. I am an emergency medicine physician by training, and I am boarded in emergency medicine and then EMS. I did an EMS fellowship. And so I do both air and ground medical direction. I flew for about 6 years over the course of my training, several different places on different platforms, both fixed and rotor. And then I work with Mike and the rest of the team at Heavy Lies the Helmet, Crash and Learn, and we have a blast over there. So we have a really good time. I think I was an educator before I was any of these things, and really my greatest regret in life is that I wasn't a paramedic before I became a doctor. That's what really got me into EMS. Is I found out that paramedics are way more interesting to talk to and cooler to hang out with than doctors, and so that's how I got here.
Yeah, and I have to give Amanda some flowers because she is our medical director at Heavy Lies the Helmet. But she's also just a really cool person. And one of the things that makes her unique, especially in the United States, is we don't have a lot of opportunities for physicians to fly in a primary care role. And Amanda is actually one of the few through UC's program that has done that. So that's one of the reasons she's really an asset to us over there.
That's phenomenal. What a crazy cool role and a dynamic that you two get together to do in both of these like positions through the podcast and through the conference. Do you guys ever get sick of each other?
um,
I don't think
yes.
so.
Oh, two very
Not
different answers there.
Not well. I bet Amanda and I would say no. I never get sick of Amanda. Some others that work with us, yes, but that's also why we love them. Um, Sometimes
Oh God, he's not even here to defend himself.
I'm not talking about just Dan, of course. If Dan, you're listening to this, no, we have a lot of fun on the platform, but we have a lot of strong personalities, and I think that's intrinsic even just to the job that we all do.
For
A lot of
sure.
type A personalities, and the filters often seem to be very plugged or just lack completely. But I think that's why we have a good working relationship because we can be honest and open with each other, and we spend our time together, and then we spend our time away, and then we come back together, and it's fantastic. So we just like to poke fun a little bit.
For sure. I don't think there are any like long-term hard feelings.
No, no, definitely
None that you guys want to share, right?
Oh.
I'm just kidding. That's awesome. No, it sounds like you guys come from two very different roles. It's really interesting, Amanda, that you talked about wanting to become, like, you wish that you had become a paramedic before you'd become a doctor. Do you think that that would have changed the path or the route that you have taken and are now on currently? Or do you think that you would still be where you are right now?
That's an interesting question. I suspect that it wouldn't be too terribly different. I think I probably would have ended up in the same place. Um, the big thing is that I regret missing some of those experiences. When I was a fellow, that was the first time that I had a lot of ground experience. So, being an emergency medicine physician, I actually flew before I had a lot of ground EMS exposure, which is obviously backwards to what a lot of paramedics experience. But when I got that exposure through my fellowship, I realized that I enjoyed it just as much. We had a blast. I remember running calls. I had my response vehicle, and it was full of Chick-fil-A crumbs and Diet Coke containers. And one time, the guy at Chick-fil-A asked me if he'd already seen me that day, and I said, "I'm going to need you to not judge me quite so much.
not.
I'm feeling attacked." But no, I just regret not having those experiences prior to getting them as a physician. Now, where I did fellowship, they were amazing and they let me be kind of one of the team. And so I feel like I got a pretty good substitute for ground paramedicine. But I think to answer your question, I probably would have ended up in the same spot. Maybe I would just have a few more war stories than I already do. So there's actually probably a lot of people that interact with me that are like, thank God she didn't do that because she already talks a lot. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not the right person to ask that question to.
I don't know. I mean, I think I don't really consider what we do specialized. in a lot of ways. It's really a conglomerate or a culmination of a lot of different areas that we try to put into one in emergency medicine. But I do think that for a lot of us, we do wish we had more perspective. Ultimately, the outcome isn't really what makes the difference, but it's the perspective you have in those roles. And I think the more and more you learn about what others do, the more you wish you had those shared experiences that you would then be able to apply to current state. Because I mean, honestly, all that we do now is just try to rob from each other's experiences or surround ourselves with people with different experiences so that
Hmm.
we can also learn from that and apply it to ourselves. So I do think that you're not alone in having some of those sentiments.
Yeah, I mean, the vehicle that we provide the care in gets talked about a lot, but it's truly secondary to the care that's provided. What I care about is that people are providing the highest level of care at the top of their ability to the sickest patients that they come across. Um, and so what vehicle that occurs in is truly secondary. And so I think I agree with Mike. I just I all I regret are the experiences that I could have had, but I am grateful for all the ones that I just went about it in a more atypical fashion. But no, I got the experience of Thanksgiving in the firehouse and some side experiences that uh that were fun.
That's awesome. And what a great, like, what a positive attitude to have about it too, because there are so many ways that you could have thought about that. Like, I really think that we're in a unique position in flight when, and we're all three different roles here, so it's kind of funny to talk about it like this. But I think we're in a really unique role where you get to work with a partner who most of the time has a completely different role than you do. And like you said, has completely different experiences than you do. So you are learning off of each other. What would you say, Mike, is like the best pairing of personnel that you can have in a flight situation? Would you say that maybe that's MD and nurse, MD paramedic, paramedic nurse, paramedic paramedic, nurse nurse? What do you think?
That's an interesting question. I do think,
Don't make any of your friends too angry.
well, so I would, first of all, I would say this: not every flight program is the same. If you've seen one flight program, you've seen one flight program. I'll steal a saying similar to what one of our team members, Nick Zuber, always says. There are varieties of scope, there are varieties of patient populations, there are varieties of geographical areas, all of which can change your mission profile. With that said, I do think that there is value in advanced practice providers on the helicopter, especially considering how the industry continues to focus more on critical care, more on bringing care to the patient as opposed to vice versa. I do think that there is a place for advanced practice providers. Is that a mid level? Is that a physician? If we're talking perfect world, I think it's a physician that is EMS board certified. I think that there's also value in the other role, though. If we just have two people, if you have a nurse that's also dual licensed as a paramedic, I think that that's the best of both worlds. You have your nurse paramedic, you've got your physician that is emergency based, and I think that you can do a lot with that.
So basically, you want everything.
Yeah.
I want everything. And is that wrong? I mean, I think we're talking like, utopia or whatever, right? We're talking about like what's the best we can have. I think having everything is the best, right? Because then you're equipped for all situations. With that said, I recognize that it's not realistic. So whether that's financial reasons, whether that's whatever the reasons are, I do think there's value in having emergency and critical care experience. I think there is a disservice when you have someone who is maybe flying as nurse and neither one of them have pre-hospital experience. I think that there will be a lack of direct experience that's needed in certain situations. And the same goes for paramedic roles. I think that without inter-hospital experience, particularly if you're doing like an ICU to ICU transfer, I don't think that you're necessarily going to have what you need to do optimal care in that situation. So I think best of both worlds is really good. I'm a really big proponent of the nurse paramedic model if you don't have that advanced practice. I think that a nurse with strong critical care experience and a paramedic with strong 911 experience, high acuity, high volume, I think that that covers a lot of bases, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We don't know what's going to come out. It may be an infant, it may be an elderly person, it may be a congenital heart defect, it may be a stroke. Like we don't know, so we need to try to put our hands on as much touch points as possible so that we are ready for anything.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think the only stuff that I would add to that is that I think that having those two sets of experience is really important. But in a true high functioning team, someone looking from the outside is not going to know which one's which. Um, that's the only thing that I would really want to add there. For me personally, if I am picking like my who I want my partner to be, I want someone with strong ICU experience because I had to rotate through the ICU in training, but I just my ADD got in the way and I didn't understand why I cared so much about their magnesium. But a good partner that really cares that that magnesium is 1.9 and not 2.1, like that's going to compliment me like real good. So it's funny if you ask me like who I want specifically. I want someone that color codes the labels on the lines because I'm not that girl.
Just say you want me, Amanda. You want me as your partner. Go ahead and say it
Permanent
officially.
partner, permanent partners.
Permanent partners right here. No, I agree with that. That's something I've always said that I think a true like tenured, high performing team, I do think that you could remove their name badges and people should not know who's who. You should be interchangeable. State law doesn't always allow you to be, but sometimes I do think that if we're talking high performing teams, once you get enough experience, there's a place to meet in the middle, and that is so valuable. So I think, yeah, I would agree that's optimal.
So that being said, like, would you have any interest in changing the ground level? Like, if we had the opportunity to put an APP or physician on an ambulance at all times, do you think that that would be ideal, or do you think that that would be too much?
Well, it's interesting. That's a very common model in Europe. And in large parts of Europe, emergency medicine isn't really a thing. There's kind of like the Franco German model, and they use anesthesiologist or anesthetist, as they call them. Shout out to my friends in Australia from many moons ago. But they use anesthesia as their pre hospital physician providers. I personally think that there is a place for it because again, the mode of transportation is actually a lot less important than we kind of all make it out to be. It's truly secondary. I think in the American EMS system, it is not practical to have a provider on every unit because of what all the system is asked to do. I mean, in the emergency department, we really consider ourselves the safety net of the health system. And I think that EMS is probably the safety net of the emergency department. And so we're truly seeing everything. I don't know that it's indicated for every single patient contact, but in terms of is there a role for providers, physicians, advanced practice providers in ground DMS? Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Lord, get me out of the hospital more. Like that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, you stole exactly what I was going to say. They use that model in Europe, and a lot of that does have to do with trying to avoid sending a physician on a lift assist or something like that. Like clearly totally inappropriate. But if you have more of a centralized dispatch that can triage calls and even have an advanced provider in the dispatch center to either provide some type of remote consultation or to make sure there's appropriate asset utilization with those physicians, I think that's really where it starts. And we just don't have that strong infrastructure in the United States to deploy it like that. And I think that's kind of where some of those models get lost. But absolutely, I 100% agree that it is needed more.
Yeah, and I think people might have different ideas of where they think that it would be the most useful, and it's not really what you think. I'm sure that most people are going to be like trauma, but trauma is actually an algorithm. Like, I hate to say it, but trauma's kind of boring. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I love a good homeboy drop off just as much as the next guy, where I get to put in bilateral chest tubes before the trauma surgeon can get downstairs. Like, that aside, trauma is not the most intricate and nuanced thing that we do. Where I found when I was a fellow physician practicing on the streets, I was most useful in complex refusals and complex psych calls. That's where I felt like my skill set was actually like being used to its maximum. And those are not, in the dispatch system, like those don't come out as an echo level call. Those are like, Bravos and Charlies. But I think that's where I found like I would walk on scene and they'd be like, "Oh God, we're so glad you're here." Whereas like trauma, like, it was fun. Like, don't get me wrong, I did it, but I didn't add as much as I did on some of those like complex decision making calls.
No, that totally makes sense. And can you explain what you meant when you said that the ER is like the safety net of emergency medicine? And you even went on further to say that the 911 system is the safety net for the ER. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So in I gotta I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna think a little bit and I'm gonna try not to get too inflammatory. But in the in the American medical system, there are a lot of barriers between patients and care. There are financial barriers, there are travel barriers, there are distance barriers, there are trying to figure out what kind of physician the patient needs to see barriers. I saw a patient recently who came in complaining of belly pain and weight loss, and someone might, without taking time to think about it, might send that guy to a GI. But actually, if you talked a little bit longer, he was really depressed and hadn't gotten out of bed in 2 weeks. And so the etiology is very different and needs a different kind of doctor. And so I would argue that there are numerous barriers between patients and care. Um, and as an emergency medicine physician in an emergency medicine department, there are minimal barriers. So you show up at my door and I'm going to take care of you. There is a famous book that was written by one of the physicians that came out of my training program called 24/7 365. And basically, what that means is any hour of the day or night, we're going to be there and we're going to do everything in our power to take care of you. And it doesn't, uh, none of minimal of those barriers come into play. You still have to get there, which is where I think EMS plays a role and becomes even our safety net. But that's basically it. You got to get there. And we'll take care of anyone. And it becomes very challenging to us, because sometimes that looks like taking care of the police officer that was shot and the person that shot him in the same ER. But we do it because I'm not the judge or the jury, and we take great pride in that. That is something that we feel very strongly about and are very proud of. Um, and I've worked in some roles in some places where I have taken care of people who were very sick, and it was because of some of those barriers, be it that they didn't understand the care that they needed, they couldn't physically get there, but everyone knows how to find the emergency department. And I think I'll just leave it at that, before I run the risk of going down rabbit trails. Um, but that is our we are specialists in the first my specialty is the first moments of everyone else's specialty. And what I mean by that is that my training is in being a resuscitationist. Once you're stabilized, honestly, I'm super bored and I'm ready to move on to the next one. Once I have placed the ET tube and hung the pressors, and the map is greater than 65, like I'm ready to move on. Um, and so that is what we really trained for. And that's what really, like, I get really excited about is undifferentiated critical illness. A lot of what we do is not that. A great percentage, definitely more than half, probably somewhere around three-quarters of what we do is unscheduled healthcare due to barriers to care. And so that has kind of become our specialty. And we're very proud of it because that is, when you really think about like, what do you get into medicine to do? Like, you get into medicine to take care of other people. And so it causes some friction and it causes some frustration. And I've never been in, any of the other types of physician shoes. And so I'm sure that there's more to it than what I see on my end of things. But I would say that me and my partners are quite proud of the fact that we we provide care first and ask all other questions later.
What an amazing answer. And going into that like a little bit further, has there ever been a time where either of you have considered just getting out of medicine altogether? This type of medicine that we do, being emergency medicine, can be quite like a moral injury, right? Because of how the system is based right now, it can be hard to get through sometimes. So has that ever made you guys second guess where you are or what you're doing with life?
Um, I would be lying if I didn't say it didn't cross my mind. I think that's normal to always kind of reassess your situation, see if where you are is where you want to be. I think that's normal. I think that's part of being an adult and being a responsible person, especially if you're responsible for others. Is this the best role for me? And that can go a lot of different ways. It could be a financial question. People tend to be compensated less in our roles, so maybe that's a factor. I think also there's the frustrations of maybe administration or others that are disconnected from the patient care that we find ourselves frustrated with because we feel like there's an impedance on what we are trying to do, and that is take care of people, like Amanda said. But I don't think that the actual taking care of the people itself has ever motivated me in that way. I think that that's where I have the most clarity is when I have a sick patient in front of me because I know what my role is, I know what needs to happen, and I know that if I can make any difference that that is going to benefit them, it's going to benefit me. So I find that in those moments, I don't question what I'm doing. It's all the other mess around it and all the other clutter that adds to the fog and adds to the noise that I think sometimes does a disservice to what we're trying to do ultimately at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think Mike explained that perfectly. When that undifferentiated sick person plops down in front of me, like that's when I set my coffee cup down and I go, we're gonna do the fun part today. But to answer your question, I mean, I think I may be saying the same thing a different way. Yeah, every single day, but never. Are there frustrations that are all ancillary to the task at hand? Yep. But I can't imagine removing myself from the task at hand. And so yeah, I think Mike and I are saying the same thing.
No, that's awesome. And I know that Amanda, you had talked about wishing that you had gone down the paramedic route. Is there any other route that you wish that you would have taken at any point in time, Mike?
That's an interesting question. I I was a late bloomer. Medicine was not my initial calling. And in retrospective, I do feel like there could have been a place for me to go to medical school and pursue a physician route. But I just was, again, I was a little bit of a late bloomer and it just didn't work out for me that way. I initially was the technologically minded, wanted to do something with technology. Specifically, I was even undergoing some like audiovisual training, graphic design. I was doing a lot of things that were non-medicine. And it was my nurse brother that really motivated me to try it out when I was looking for a career change when my other career wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And interesting full circle how I've applied some of that to our own platform. But um, I do think that I would have liked to pursue something like that. But honestly, I'm not, this is going to get a little bit philosophical, but I'm not a big person on regret. I'm not a big person. I don't like to live in the past and say, I wish I did this. I wish I did that because I made a lot of mistakes and I've also made a lot of good choices. And ultimately, I'm happy where I am. I think that you can apply those motivations in other areas. And a lot of this goes back to even what I was saying before. I think you can surround yourself with people with different experiences and still get a level of that experience for yourself, even living through others. Is it possible that I never did medicine? Yeah. So I'm very thankful that I'm even in the field, to be completely honest, based on my history. So I think that there's a lot to unpack there, but ultimately, I think I'm doing what I want to do. I'm flying in a helicopter and take care of super sick people. I'm also getting to educate on the side, which I've always loved education. I even thought about being a teacher for a while before my audiovisual pursuits. So it's funny how I've kind of taken all these bits and pieces of interest I've had previously, and somehow I've been able to culminate them into the ultimate outcome that is running an education company, editing and producing a podcast, and then also taking care of really sick people. And so, yeah, I guess that's just a roundabout way to say I've thought of it, but ultimately I'm happy where I am.
Could you have like done some like, I don't know, culinary training too?
Probably. I mean, I'm a little bit of a foodie. I cook. I do like to cook. So my problem is I like too many things because then I also at one point I thought I was going to be a professional skateboarder. I used to play music. I used to play music in a band. Like I had no idea what
You
I wanted
can't,
to
I
do.
can't benefit from you being a professional skateboarder, but I think I could benefit from your culinary training.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
What's your favorite thing to make?
I like to do a lot of, I like Korean food and Japanese food probably the most. My wife kind of gives me a hard time because we have this giant wok and she hates the wok. It doesn't fit in the cabinet. So what she does is she puts the wok in the basement. So when it's my time to cook, I have to go down the basement. I have to clean off the wok and like I love like the whole one dish, put it all in and it turns out really good. I'm a big sauce guy. I like to make a lot of sauces. So I would say that's kind of my big thing.
That's awesome. So, what brought you guys together to do the podcast together and then ultimately move on to Crash and Learn?
From my perspective, I knew about the podcast. We have the third kind of arm of our typical podcasting group, Dan Rao. He and I flew together back in the day, and so I was invited on for a guest episode, um, and really hit it off. We had a blast, and I was like, "Hey, like y'all, y'all looking for a friend?" And they said yes, and that was 2021, 2022. I think we actually recorded my first episode when I was in fellowship. So that would have been academic year 2020, 2021. So it's been a good 3-4 years now that we have been plugging along.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about how much time has gone by.
I know,
We
right?
initially started the podcast in 2017. And going back to what I said, my brother, the nurse. So him and I were in similar fields. Once I decided to go get a job at the hospital, decided to pursue healthcare. Him and I, because we're brothers, we were associating a lot. We're having a lot of conversations, and I used to confide in him a lot about my care, the patients I was seeing, looking for insight because he had been doing it longer. And those conversations evolved into what would be a podcast. And because my visual training, I already knew how to edit video, I already knew how to edit audio. And even though the equipment wasn't something we invested in early on, I still had the know-how and the knowledge to take it, do post-production. I was like, why don't we just record this? Because at the time, podcasts were still kind of up and coming. I think well, I know they are. They're much more frequent now than what they used to be. Back then, you basically had MCRIT, which wasn't even directly flight, and then you had FlightBridge Ed, and that was it for what we did. So we thought there was value to record ourselves and share it, but we also always approached it as we're trying to learn as well. I think the best way to learn is to be a teacher. And people really latched onto it, whether it was the lack of options or they just liked kind of our style and the fact we were brothers. The podcast took off. And then later on, we decided we wanted to bring in a different dynamic. Dan Rao was a friend of a friend. He was in Cincinnati. We were at, I think it was AMTC maybe, and we brought him on as a guest. And Dan is, I will just say, he's very particular about who he associates with. He's very particular about the care that he gives, which is all, these are all good things because he is very good at what he does. And
But
I
some
take,
of Dan gets edited out.
he does get edited out sometimes, but no.
This is just tell all right here.
But we were able to have an
I won't
intelligent
tell your secrets.
conversation, and thank you, thank you. But yeah, we were able to have an intelligent conversation, and even though we were so different, there were a lot of similarities. Him and my brother were both hunters, and there was a lot of things that was like, hey, this is fun. Let's try to do more of this. So we brought Dan on as a permanent uh, part of the podcast, and then it kind of just grew from there, as it does organically. We started to do more, brought in Amanda, started getting into the educational space outside the podcast. So it wasn't all at once. It was just a very gradual thing. When we first started, we had no desires or no thoughts that it would ever become more than that. But it has, and we're very thankful for that. We're thankful for our audience. We're thankful for the passion that we see in our circles. And also, I think one thing that's really cool is going back to a conversation we had at Crash and Learn, is that it feels like we have a new generation now. And this new generation is very open to learning. They are very passionate people. And we actually have a fairly young demographic, especially in the Crash and Learn space, which is very cool to see because it gives us a sense now that we're kind of helping the next generation of people to where we can now pass the torch and then they can take it and run with it and do new cool things and continue to educate people and continue to help one another and continue to hopefully improve the industry as a whole, doing our small part. So it's been a really cool evolution, and I'm very thankful for it.
That's awesome. And I really like that you talked about the younger generation. Would you agree that you feel like they are a little more emotionally inclined than we were coming up in EMS?
What do you mean by that? How would you describe that? I think I know, and I think I know my answer, but
They are more open to having the feelings and sharing the feelings that we were told to suck it up.
yeah, no, definitely. And like full disclosure, being where I'm at, where I would say that I am a little bit like I'm a little bit like right in between the two. Like I'm kind of in that like gray area where I'm a little bit of the old guard and a little bit of the new guard. Um in my like in my heart of hearts, and for people that have listened to me speak, like they know that I'm like a full supporter of that. um but sometimes I'm also like, man, it was also kind of easier when we all just like swallowed it and didn't say anything. um not in the long term,
Yeah.
but in the short term. So but no, I think that they are absolutely taking a more progressive and more beneficial approach to things than what we were taught to do. And I think ultimately my hope is, and I think one of the biggest issues facing our industry is attrition, right? Like we are having trouble keeping enough people in the field, both through multiple mechanisms, right? Like, and in some ways it's a good thing. Like, nurses have always had multiple career opportunities. Paramedics, not so much. And now I think more than ever, there's a lot of there are growing career opportunities for paramedics outside of street medicine. Um, and that's great. But as a medical director, I'm tired of losing the best ones. And so my hope is that by handling this in a more appropriate, healthy way, maybe we'll get some people to stick around. Maybe it will improve lifespan in the profession.
Yeah, I think Amanda, you have a very balanced approach. You have spoken on this. She was actually Amanda was one of our keynote speakers a couple years ago at Crash and Learn, and she has a lot of really good evidence-based insight on a lot of this stuff, which I very much appreciate because we're starting to get more and more evidence on the appropriate way to handle these situations. I do think that there was certainly a stigma with some older generations, and I don't know that we always took care of our own to an appropriate degree. And I think that with newer generations, we've come to realize that that is a very much important part of what we do as far as longevity. If you're someone that has the mental capacity to do the job, you can still have bad days and you still need a level of a support system to continue to prevent burnout, to continue to be able to think clearly in very tense situations. And even like the debrief process. I know a lot of what we associate a debrief for, it has to do with the patient care we provided, or even from a safety standpoint, when we do a debrief with a pilot, were there any safety concerns? Those discussions should also include the a mental wellness component, right? Especially if you have a responsibility, like I think back to me as a supervisor, if I know that one of my crews went on a very difficult flight, i.e., whatever your flavor of difficult is, pediatric arrest, I think is a common one we associate. If you are aware of that, I think that there is a responsibility and also a consistency, it seems like, that a lot of people now recognize the importance of reaching out to that crew and saying, hey, are you all okay? I recognize that this was potentially difficult. What can I do to support you? And I don't think we always got that before, but something that has very much, I'm starting to see more of the norm.
Sure. No, that totally makes sense. And speaking of that, do either or both of you feel comfortable talking about maybe one of the worst experiences that you've had so far in this career in medicine?
Yeah, it's interesting when you are asked that question. That seems to be a common question a lot of non-trained people will ask, but also trained people, it tends to be under a different context, a different motive. It's not about war stories necessarily. It's more about, so maybe I understand the indication or the want because it's about, empathy and sharing how we got through something. So I totally get that. For me personally, I think that when you've been doing this job long enough, you are always going to have experiences. And there are certainly a couple that I could pick out. Um, I would say, just like generally speaking, it's usually a lack of control. I find where my worst experiences are is when I have a really bad patient that I feel really sorry for and I want to help them, but their condition is not compatible with life. And I think sometimes that lack of control leaves you with a sense of loss. It leaves you with a sense of maybe inadequacy, like maybe there was something that I could have done. I think that these are common, or at least in my experience, what I feel whenever I've had a really hard situation like that. And I think that, how do I want to say this? I think that if you're not having those moments that inspire self reflection, I don't think you're going to have, again, longevity in this industry. I think that it's important that we all reflect, but we don't dwell. And that's part of that reflection on, okay, if there was something I could do better, what can I take away from this? Is it an emotional defense mechanism that I can improve on? If it was solely based on that, is there a clinical aspect that maybe I can refocus and try to improve on that would at least optimize that better. I think it just kind of depends on the situation. But ultimately, I think the important thing is that we reflect on these situations and we look for uh, a lesson learned.
Yeah, I actually want to build on what you said because I think that that is a super important point that you made. So you talked about how difficult experiences are those where basically what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't able to, it had to do with lack of control and not being able to fix the problem. And I agree with you, but I would take that a step further and say the situations that left me the most distraught were those where I perceived that I had control, but I did not. And so I would argue that we could take this even a step further and say, is my was my perception in line with reality? So like for example, I and Dan and I have talked about, I think Dan and I have brought up this particular flight on the podcast a few times because it was Dan and I together. But a young mom who was essentially a pedestrian struck and was talking to us when we got there, and then ultimately died in the trauma bay. And there are many educational kind of points that Dan and I have gone through talking about, knowing when to get out of Dodge, and knowing when not to use the laryngoscope as a murder weapon. But for this conversation, I think that the crux is the patient was awake and talking and then dead. In my mind, I did something wrong because of the circumstances. But did I have the control that I thought I had there? And I would say that the answer is no, because that is unfortunately the most common mechanism of death and trauma is catastrophic bleeding. And she had catastrophic bleeding. And so I think for me, I would take it. You said it's those situations where you didn't have control. Sometimes it's very clear to me that I don't have control. Someone comes into the ER and they've been in arrest for half an hour, and that is like that's a very clear delineation in my mind. I'm like, they came in dead. They've been dead for half an hour. I didn't make them undead. I'm not God. And I tend to be able to walk away from that, like not feeling like I missed anything. But God, when they talk to you before they die, like that really makes you question, did I miss something? Did I do something wrong? And so I think for me, the most difficult situations, and the ones that affect me the most are those where either I perceived I had control and I did not, or in some cases, I so desperately wanted to have control that I actually like forced my brain into perceiving that maybe I did. I'm getting a little like philosophic and esoteric. Does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, it did. I appreciate that. And you can literally tailor that to almost any flight or call that you would have taken that you felt like you didn't have control over, or even sometimes the ones that you did feel like you had control over. We just had a code with a young lady who, just like you said, was talking, and within minutes she was not talking. And in that code, literally, there was nothing that we could have done because she had a huge saddlebag PE. And even though we were really close to resources, we couldn't get there fast enough. There literally just it impossible. But the fact that she was talking and wasn't talking, like that really bothered, you know, that was hard on everybody. Um, can you give us one example or something that you are most proud of in your career?
Overall, I would say that what I'm most proud of in my career is that I have been able to maintain a level, or what I hope of a level of influence on the patients beyond those that are in front of me. We do things every day and we significantly impact mortality on a singular basis in these jobs. But I genuinely do feel that the greatest impact you can have is, you know, teaching the person to fish as opposed to giving them a fish, or whatever the old adage is. It's really about, at the end of the day, education for me. And I'm very proud of any time that I get feedback where someone sends an email and says, "Hey, just so you know, this thing you said on the podcast affected my care and this patient had a good outcome." That's not a patient that I would ever see in my helicopter, but somehow I still was able to impact their care. Me, and I say me, meaning like Amanda and everyone else that I work with. So to me, I think that's been the thing I'm proud of the most, is somehow I have been able to find a way to still help people in a greater scope than I could ever do at my 9 to 5. So uh, keep sending me those emails. I appreciate when you all do the Instagram messages or whatever. I genuinely do have a passion for education, and that's one of the primary reasons. And that's why I'm so proud to also be able to consider myself an educator because of that impact.
Yeah, no, that I agree with all that. This is I've got a significant recency bias because one of these incidents happened yesterday, but I would say it is those situations where I advocated for a patient and it got them what they needed. Back to that whole kind of, we in the ER are the safety net. I recently had a patient that very clearly needed something, and I was getting pushback from the people that were capable of doing what they needed. Um, and I went about it in a little bit of a brash way, but I got them the one thing that was going to keep them alive, and it was one of those moments where I was like, all right, I can do this for another 24 hours, because I was able to see, um, it was clear to me that I made a positive outcome. People like, especially people outside of the field, they like say things all the time like, "Oh my god, you save lives." And I'm like, "But do I really?" Like, I saw 18 belly pain in OS today. Like, I'm not really sure that I actually did anything. And so it's actually kind of rare that you are able to see. And part of that is the nature of what we do, right? Like, we don't see people over time. Um, every once in a while you get one of those where it's really clear that you had to take matters into your own hands a little bit. Um, Text messages were sent that included phrases like "don't regret it." So we'll see. But it was yeah, that I would say is something that I was very proud of.
Yeah, that's cool. I want to throw this in here because you're right. I don't think we get a lot of follow up on patients, and one thing that's cool about my shop is they try to be intentional about patient reunions. And I know, like, I'm the non-specific guy, so let me give you a specific example. I'm going to go against my nature here. So I had the privilege, and a lot of this was televised on the news and stuff too. So this isn't like a HIPAA issue, but I had a kid who was he was a young person. He was a minor, and he was street racing. Ultimately, ended up colliding with the other vehicle. He was ejected. There was unfortunately some death from some of the other passengers, but he ultimately was able to be transported. Long story short, it was a very procedure heavy polytrauma scene call that we went on. And ultimately, because of the interventions that we took, uh, how aggressive we were with what he needed, ultimately ended up being the first successful Roboa case in our hospital system. And he's alive to this day. He's walking, talking. I got to meet him, got to meet his family. And that was a very, very rewarding experience because not only did I get to experience that directly and having uh, directly impacted his outcome, but my service was able to take that case. And again, I'm all about education. They were able to take that case and show the importance of some of these other things that maybe weren't necessarily getting the attention that they needed. And thus, my hope is that that experience then helped subsequent patients. So that's definitely a moment too I was very proud of. And just as a shout out, if you're not doing patient reunions, try to do that for your crews, or try, if you get those opportunities, take advantage of them. Because I think those moments do give you something, give you a nugget of hope, a nugget of, pride that I think can really help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My only patient reunion that I've ever had was completely accidental. Um,
Was it at Chick-fil-A?
Dude was like in horrible cardiogenic shock. I actually assumed he was dead. And he had been discharged and came back to the ED with epistaxis from his new aspirin and Plavix. And I saw him as the ED doc, and he looked a little familiar. And I went back and looked in the chart, which, I was allowed to do because I was currently taking care of him. And I realized he was the guy that I had flown that I thought was dead. And it had been like a legit comedy of errors. Like, we get to the sending facility, we've got everything ready to transition over, and then our vent dies. We have to call another aircraft to bring us a vent. Then, and it's like 20 degrees outside. We get out on the helipad, we finally get him loaded, and the helicopter breaks. And so luckily the other helicopter that brought us a vent was there, but they're on a different stretcher system. So we had to like switch him over to a different stretcher in the middle of the night on a helipad in 20 degrees. And I remember thinking, like, this guy's going to die, and it's literally going to be because we're like letting him be 20 degrees right now. But no, he actually got discharged to rehab, and came back in with like nuisance epistaxis. And so that's the only patient reunion I've ever had. It was purely accidental. But he did let me take our picture together, and I have it. So that was kind of cool.
That's awesome. I think it's hard to like let people know too when it's 20 degrees outside, like it's not just cold, right? Your ears are freezing, your fingers are freezing, everything is freezing. Like the onesies are terrible because they're so thin. Nothing's keeping you warm. Ugh, that you describing that made me feel very uncomfortable.
It was like, it was a nightmare. It
Yeah.
was the worst. It was a horrible night. And he was like, I was pretty sure. I was like, we're doing nothing positive for this man.
I mean, the cold temperature was probably slowing his metabolism down, which ultimately probably did end up saving him, right?
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah, it gave his coronaries a little more
There
diastole.
you go. Well, I want to give you two the opportunity to talk about anything you feel that we didn't talk about that you feel strongly about talking about, or doing any shout outs of any kind that you would like to. Amanda, I'll let you go ahead and go first.
I think we covered like quite a broad array, education, and how satisfying it is to train, and to be available to a generation that is very excited to learn. And that was actually like not a thing like all that long ago. When I was in training, like you were supposed to already know everything somehow magically. And so to admit that you didn't know something was a bit of a moral failing. And so it's very refreshing and very exciting to see these young providers who are like super stoked to learn things, and to see the light bulb go off, so to speak. And I get really excited when I teach Some things in particular, and I tell people, and I stole this line from a doctor who taught me EKGs many, many moons ago. I'm just so excited that I understand it well enough to teach it, that like that's why I get a little crazy when I am teaching it. So y'all are just gonna have to deal with it. But no, we talked about that. We managed to talk about, the pride in emergency medicine, and how we feel about what we do. And I think that most of my partners would agree with me on that one. And we talked about the importance of taking care of your people, and one of the ways to take care of them is to let them see good outcomes. It's the bad ones that stick with you, and so trying to pepper in the good, I think, is so critical. There is a flight physician up in the Wisconsin area who has kind of a little hashtag that she uses, and she calls it the beauty to death ratio. And I stole that, and I love that because we see a lot of the worst of humanity, but we also get to see the best of humanity, and it can be exhausting. But you have to make sure, when you've been subject to a little too much death, because the balance isn't always quite right, that you go out and find the beauty. And so I love her beauty to death ratio. I stole it. I taught it to all of my current providers. I think some of them listened and maybe took something away from it. And so I will be satisfied with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about a lot. One of the things that I always say, and I'll just throw in here, is that don't try to be the smartest person in the room. If you're the smartest person in the room, it's time to find a new room. I think that you need to surround yourself, whether that's emotional intelligence, whether that's medical intelligence. I always try to find rooms where I can learn something, and I would just encourage everyone to do the same. If you feel like you are at your capacity in your role, then try something new. I think that the ways that we approach education, the ways that we approach the jobs that we do, there's a lot of variety and a lot of ways that you can improve your situation. If you don't like where you're working, there's a lot of other places that are hiring right now. If you don't like the way you're being taught, go online. There's a lot of platforms now. We live in what I think is an education renaissance. And whether it's this podcast or others, whatever floats your boat, even if it's non-medical, there's a lot of knowledge to be gained in a lot of ways we can do it. So I just encourage anyone that's listening to continue to do that. Don't lose sight of that drive. And if you find yourself with a lack of drive, then try to change your room, and then you might become inspired.
What a great statement. And to both of you guys, thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation. It's been an honor for you guys to be on today. I've enjoyed meeting you guys and getting to know you guys a little bit better. And I really hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you guys. And take care, fly safe, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show and want to show your support, be sure to check out the new merch store on Bonfire. Find the link in the description below. Also, if you have any guest suggestions, or if you're interested in being a guest on Noon yourself, visit the website at www.samspursuit.com to get in touch.